The day I signed the delivery app contract, my husband didn't even look at me. He stood in our kitchen, leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone while I held a pen with shaking fingers. The contract was thin, cheap paper. Temporary work, minimum pay, no benefits. The kind of job you swear you'll only do for a few weeks. "I'll be out late tonight," he said casually without lifting his eyes. "Don't wait up." That was it. No question, no concern, just an exit. Before I continue, let me pause here for a second. If you've ever lost everything and watched the people closest to you quietly step away instead of reaching for you, hit like. If betrayal didn't come with screaming, but with indifference, leave a comment. And if you want to hear how this ended, subscribe and stay with me. This story doesn't reward those who walk away too early. My name is Marissa Caldwell. I was 31 years old when my life collapsed in a way that looked boring from the outside. No fire, no police, no dramatic headlines. Just paperwork, silence, and people choosing comfort over loyalty. I used to own a restaurant, not a dream, not a fantasy. A real place with grease-stained menus, a loyal lunch crowd, and a profit margin that kept me awake at night. The restaurant was called Harbor and Vine, a 40-seat seafood bistro on the edge of St. Petersburg, Florida. I opened it when I was 28, after 7 years working my way up from line cook to kitchen manager in coastal restaurants up and down the Gulf. I put in $212,000. My savings, a small SBA loan, a personal loan I co-signed with my husband, Ethan Caldwell, who liked the idea of owning a restaurant but never liked the work. "You're good at this stuff," he always said. "I trust you." That phrase mattered to me more than it should have. My best friend, Lauren Pierce, helped me design the space. She chose the paint colors, the lighting, the logo font. We'd been inseparable since college. She cried the night we opened, hugging me in the kitchen while the first dinner service buzzed outside. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." I believed her. The restaurant did well for 18 months. Not wildly, but steadily. Enough that I paid myself a modest salary, covered payroll, and started planning a second location someday. Then the supplier issue happened. It started small. A shipment delayed, a billing error, a vendor switch recommended by a man named Victor Sloan, who introduced himself as a food distribution consultant. He wore clean shoes and talked fast. Lauren knew him. Said he'd helped a friend streamline costs. I trusted her. Within 6 months, I was drowning. Invoices didn't match deliveries. Quality slipped. Refunds piled up. I fought it, chased paperwork, tried to unwind the contract. Too late. The clause I missed locked me in for a year. When I finally brought the books to an accountant, the number was clear. I was short $94,000. By the time Harbor and Vine closed, the total loss was $180,000. Ethan stopped coming by the restaurant before it officially shut down. Said it stressed him out. Lauren stayed close. Too close. Always reassuring. Always telling me not to panic. "You'll bounce back," she said. "You're strong. Strong enough, apparently, to fail quietly." The bank took the equipment. The landlord took the deposit. The SBA loan default followed me like a shadow. Ethan's name was on the loan, but I was the one making calls, filling forms, apologizing. When I suggested selling his motorcycle to help cover the gap, he laughed. "That's not my problem," he said. "The restaurant was your thing." That was the first time I heard it phrased that way. I took the delivery job because it paid immediately. Because rejection letters from other restaurants came fast once my closure became public. Because humiliation has a way of narrowing your options. I wore a navy jacket with a company logo stitched crooked on the chest, drove my own car, delivered food I used to cook. The night Ethan said he'd be out late, I knew where he was. Lauren had stopped answering my texts 2 weeks earlier. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I watched. 3 days later, he moved out, packed a suitcase, took his laptop, left his wedding ring on the counter. "I need something lighter," he said. "This whole situation changed you." He didn't mention Lauren. He didn't have to. She posted a photo with him the following weekend. Nothing obvious, just wine glasses and a caption about fresh starts. I was tagged by someone else. That was how I found out. I slept on a mattress on the floor that night. the house felt hollow. Not sad. Empty. What surprised me wasn't the pain. It was the clarity. Because once everything was gone, I could see what had been there all along. Ethan didn't leave when I failed. He left when I stopped carrying him. Lauren didn't betray me suddenly. She waited until I was weak enough not to fight back. The delivery job took me all over the city. Condos, offices, gated homes with long driveways. I learned which doors opened quickly and which ones didn't. One Tuesday afternoon, I delivered a bag of groceries to a waterfront estate in Clearwater. The receipt said Walter Hensley. The tip line was blank. I didn't know his name meant anything. Not yet. I handed him the bag at the door. He was older, mid-60s, well-dressed without trying. He looked at me for a second longer than necessary. "You used to run a restaurant," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He nodded toward the bag. "You stacked the containers like a chef." I didn't answer. He smiled slightly. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "Same time." That was all. No explanation. No promise. I drove away with my heart beating faster than it had in weeks. Because for the first time since everything collapsed, someone had seen me. Not the uniform, not the failure. Me. And I didn't yet know that this small moment would be the first crack in a wall that had been closing around my life. But it was. And once cracks start, nothing stays sealed forever. I almost didn't go back the next day. Not because I didn't want to, but because hope felt dangerous. Hope had a cost I couldn't afford anymore. I woke up early, checked the delivery app, and saw the same address pop up at exactly 3:02 p.m. Grocery delivery. Same name, Walter Hensley. Same waterfront estate. I accepted it before I could overthink. The drive there took 40 minutes. I spent most of it arguing with myself. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he liked ordering from the same person. Maybe I was reading meaning into nothing because my life had gotten too quiet. When I arrived, the gate opened without me touching the call box. That alone made my pulse jump. Walter Hensley answered the door himself again. This time he was wearing a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, no shoes. The kind of comfort that comes from never needing to impress anyone. "You came," he said. "You asked?" I replied. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. "Come in." I hesitated. "I'm working," I said. "So am I," he replied, already turning away. The interior of the house was nothing like I expected. No marble showpieces, no dramatic art. Just clean lines, soft light, and the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need reminders of his wealth. He gestured toward the kitchen island. "Set it there." I did. Out of habit, I rearranged the items quickly. Heavier bags underneath, cold items grouped, fragile containers protected. Muscle memory I hadn't used in months. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," I replied. "I wanted to." He studied my hands. "You ran front and back of house." "Yes." "And the kitchen," he added. "Yes." "You lost it fast," he said. Not accusing, observing. "Yes." He leaned back against the counter. "Sit." I stayed standing. "Marissa Caldwell," he said calmly. "You owned Harbor and Vine." My throat tightened slightly. "You looked me up." "I don't guess," he replied. "I verify." That was my first real look at him. Not just the money, the precision. "I didn't ask you here to embarrass you," Walter Hensley continued. "I asked because I'm considering investing in hospitality again." Again. "I don't have anything to offer," I said. "I'm delivering groceries." "You're surviving," he corrected. "That's different." He poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward me. I finally sat. "Tell me how you lost the restaurant," he said. I told him, not dramatically, just facts. Vendor switch, contract clause, cash shortfall, closure. "And your husband?" he asked. "He left," I said. "Timing?" "Right after," I replied. "And your business partner?" he asked. "I didn't have one," I said. "Just a best friend who knew when to step away." He nodded slowly. "Those are often worse." I didn't ask who he was. Something told me he'd tell me when it mattered. "Do you want it back?" he asked. The question sat between us, heavier than any contract I'd ever signed. "Yes," I said, "but not the same way." "Explain," he said. "I don't want to prove anything to anyone," I said. "I want to build something clean, something no one can take just because they feel entitled to it." A small smile touched his mouth. Good answer. He stood, walked to a desk near the window, picked up a folder. I sold my restaurant group 12 years ago, he said. I've stayed out of the industry since. Too much noise. Too many egos. He placed the folder in front of me, but I never stopped watching, he continued. Harbor and Vine was on my radar. I opened the folder carefully. Inside were photos, my restaurant, reviews, financial summaries. You were efficient, he said. Your margins were tight, but honest. Your mistake wasn't incompetence. It was trusting the wrong advisor. Victor Sloan. The name echoed in my head. You know him, I said. I know of him, Walter replied. He's been circling distressed restaurants for years. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And no one stops him? People like him don't get stopped, Walter said. They get exposed. He looked at me directly. I don't offer charity. I wouldn't accept it, I said. Good, he replied. I offer partnerships. My heart beat louder. I'll help you reopen, he said. Different concept, different structure. You control operations. I fund and advise. No personal guarantees, no silent clauses. I stared at him. Why? Because you stacked grocery bags like a chef, he said simply. And because you didn't beg, I swallowed. What's the catch? I asked. He smiled. You do it right. Or you walk. I didn't hesitate. I do it right. He nodded. Good. Because the people who hurt you, they don't expect patience. They expect collapse. He slid a business card across the table. Just a name. Walter Hensley. No title. Tomorrow, he said, we start paperwork. I stood, legs slightly unsteady. As I walked out, he spoke again. Oh, Marissa. I turned. Don't contact your ex, he said. Don't contact your former friend. Let them get comfortable. I nodded. Outside, the sun was blinding. My phone buzzed with another delivery request, but I declined it for the first time since I'd started, because something had shifted. Not hope, leverage. And the people who had walked away from me had no idea that the ground under them was about to change. They thought I was still delivering meals. They had no idea I was about to reclaim the kitchen. And this time, no one would be eating for free. Paperwork doesn't feel like revenge while you're doing it. It feels boring, slow, exacting. The opposite of the fantasies people imagine when they think about payback. But that's where everything real begins. Walter Hensley didn't rush me. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that he never spoke in hypotheticals. We met in his office 2 days later. Not at his house this time, but in a low-rise building overlooking the bay. No logo on the door. No receptionist. Just a long table, a pot of coffee, and a woman in her 40s already seated with a laptop open. This is Dana Whitmore, Walter said. My attorney. Dana Whitmore didn't smile. She nodded once and went back to typing. And this, Walter continued, gesturing to me, is Marissa Caldwell. Dana looked up then. Really looked. Not at my clothes. At my posture. My eyes. Good, she said quietly. You're early. That turned out to be a compliment. The first 3 hours were questions. Not about my dreams, about my decisions. Why I chose my original location. How I priced my menu. Which nights were profitable and which weren't. How I handled staff turnover. Why I trusted Victor Sloan. That last one stung. I didn't trust him, I said carefully. I trusted the person who brought him to me. Walter's mouth twitched. Dana typed faster. They asked for numbers. I didn't have everything, but I had enough. Old spreadsheets, bank statements, tax filings saved to a cloud folder I hadn't opened since the shutdown. Dana reviewed them silently. Occasionally, she underlined something on the screen with her finger. You didn't bleed cash, she said finally. You suffocated. I nodded. That was exactly what it felt like. By the end of the meeting, there was no handshake, no dramatic agreement, just a checklist. Entity formation, capital injection, lease options, non-compete review, vendor vetting. Take the weekend, Walter said. Decide if you're ready to be visible again. I drove home in silence. That night, Ethan Caldwell texted me for the first time in weeks. Saw your car near Clearwater today. You okay? I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down. Visibility, I realized, wasn't about being seen. It was about choosing who got access. On Monday morning, I resigned from the delivery app. No ceremony, Just a click and a confirmation email that thanked me for my service. It felt oddly appropriate. The next 6 weeks were a blur of structure. We didn't reopen Harbor and Vine. Walter insisted on that. People romanticize ruins, he said. We built forward. The new concept was leaner, smaller menu, higher turnover, a name that didn't reference the past. Salt Line. It would open in Dunedin, not St. Petersburg. A different crowd, fewer tourists, more locals, less noise. I was 31, broke on paper, and somehow running point on a restaurant backed by a man whose net worth I still didn't know. Walter didn't interfere with operations. He reviewed contracts, asked questions that forced me to justify decisions, cut off one vendor before I even noticed the red flags. Patterns repeat, he said, unless you interrupt them. Lauren Pierce tried to interrupt me first. She showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon, sunglasses too big, smile too careful. I heard you were back on your feet, she said. I leaned against the doorframe, didn't invite her in. Who told you? I asked. She hesitated. Ethan. Of course. I wanted to check on you, Lauren continued. Things ended so abruptly. I hate how it all happened. So do I said. She shifted her weight. We should talk. I studied her face. The familiarity felt distant now, like remembering a language I no longer spoke. There's nothing to clarify, I said. You chose where to stand. Her smile faded. You don't know the whole story. I know enough, I replied. She exhaled sharply. You've changed. Yes, I said. That was the point. I closed the door gently. Ethan didn't come himself. He sent messages instead. Casual ones. Nostalgic ones. Remember when we talked about opening a second place? I ignored them all. Salt Line opened on a Thursday. No grand opening, no influencers. Just a soft launch and a wait list that surprised even me. The kitchen ran smoothly, the staff trusted me, the numbers held. On opening night, I stepped outside for air and found Walter standing by the curb, hands in his pockets. You didn't look once toward the door, he said. I didn't need to, I replied. He nodded. That's when you know you're ready. 2 weeks later, I ran into Ethan at a wine bar downtown. He froze when he saw me, then smiled too fast. You look good, he said. So do you, I replied, which was polite and untrue. He gestured to the empty stool beside him. Can we talk? Not here, I said. He swallowed. I made a mistake. Yes, I said. That's it? He asked. That's it, I replied. I left him there, staring into his glass. What I didn't know yet was that Ethan and Lauren weren't just together. They were planning something. And Victor Sloan, the man who helped sink my first restaurant, was about to make another appearance. Because when people believe you're finished, they stop hiding. And that's when you see them most clearly. The first warning didn't come from Ethan or Lauren. It came from my payroll provider. I was standing in the back hallway at Salt Line, counting invoices while the lunch rush hummed through the dining room, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer. Something told me to. Is this Marissa Caldwell? A man asked. Yes. This is Henry Lopez with Gulf Coast Payroll. We handle compliance reviews for several hospitality clients. I'm calling because your name came up during a routine audit. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed even. In what context? A former business, he said. Harbor and Vine. I closed my eyes briefly. That business is closed. Yes, Henry Lopez said. We know. That's why this is unusual. I stepped into the office and shut the door. He continued. We received a request for historical payroll verification tied to that entity. The request came from a third-party consultant. I already knew the name before he said it. Victor Sloan. Henry Lopez. Confirmed. Why would he request that? I asked. That's what I wanted to understand, Henry replied. He cited ongoing partnership discussions. I laughed once. Short. Dry. There are no partnership discussions, I said. That company no longer exists. Then you should know, Henry said carefully, that he also requested documentation under your former marital co-signer, Ethan. The pieces clicked together slowly, like something cold locking into place. Thank you for calling, I said. Can you forward me the request? Already did, Henry replied. And Ms. Caldwell? For what it's worth, your payroll history was clean. That mattered more then he knew. I forwarded the email to Walter Hensley and Dana Whitmore within minutes. Dana called first. "They're fishing," she said. "Badly." "For what?" I asked. "Leverage," she replied. "Or a story." Walter joined the call a moment later. "Victor Sloan doesn't make moves without backup," he said. "If he's reaching for old paperwork, it's because someone told him there's value there." "Ethan," I said. "Or Lauren," Walter added. "Or both." I leaned back in my chair, letting the hum of the restaurant fill the silence. "They think I'm still exposed," I said. "They think you're desperate," Walter replied. "Which means they're about to overplay." That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car across the street from Salt Line and watched the windows glow as the dinner crowd filtered in. My name wasn't on the sign. My face wasn't on the website. But everything inside that room worked because I was there. I didn't need to announce myself anymore. 2 days later, Lauren Pierce posted an engagement photo. No ring close-up, no caption naming Ethan, just her hand on his chest and the words, "Something good is coming." Mutual friends flooded the comments. I was tagged again. This time, I didn't feel anything at all. Ethan texted me an hour later. "We should talk before you hear things from other people." I replied with one word, "No." That seemed to irritate him. "You don't get to rewrite the story, Marissa." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I already did." The next move came quietly. Dana uncovered it while reviewing vendor background checks for Salt Line. Victor Sloan was listed as a silent partner in a new restaurant group forming in Tampa. The LLC name was bland, forgettable, but the registered agent caught her attention. "Lauren Pierce." Dana called me immediately. "They're trying to open a place," she said. "Fast. Likely using the same playbook." "Where's the money coming from?" I asked. "Not from Victor," Dana replied. "He's the facilitator, not the funder." "Then who?" Dana hesitated. "Your ex-husband refinanced his condo 2 months ago." Ethan had always said he hated debt. I felt something then. Not anger. Certainty. "They're building on sand," I said. "Yes," Dana agreed. "And they want to use your failure as proof of concept." That was the insult beneath the surface. Not just that I failed, but that my failure could be monetized. Walter asked one question that night. "Do you want to stop them?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. "No," I said. "I want them to show everyone how they operate." "Then we wait," Walter replied. Waiting was harder than action. Salt Line continued to grow. Word spread. A second location became a conversation instead of a fantasy. Staff turnover stayed low. Vendors respected boundaries. One evening, after closing, a woman approached me in the dining room. She introduced herself as Nina Alvarez, a local food columnist. "I hear you don't do interviews," she said. "I don't," I replied. "But you used to," she said gently. "Back when Harbor and Vine opened." That name again. "I'm not the same person," I said. She smiled. "That's why I'm interested." I glanced toward the kitchen, toward the line cooks finishing cleanup, toward the quiet rhythm of a place that worked. "One question," I said. "Just one," Nina agreed. "Off the record," I said. "Of course." I leaned in slightly. "Ask me again in 6 months," I said, "when the contrast is clearer." She nodded slowly. Understood. That same week, Ethan showed up at Salt Line. Not during service. After closing. He stood at the bar, hands in his pockets, like he used to when he was waiting for me to finish a shift. "Lauren says you won't talk to her," he said. "That's not my responsibility," I replied. "She thinks you're trying to sabotage us," he continued. I looked at him then. Really looked. "You don't matter enough for that," I said. His jaw tightened. "You think you're better now." "I think I'm done carrying people who watch me drown," I replied. He laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't have survived without help." "That's true," I said. "But I chose it. You didn't." I turned off the lights and walked past him. As I locked the door, he said one last thing. "You're not as protected as you think." I didn't turn around, because protection wasn't what I had anymore. I had visibility. And when people like Ethan and Lauren started moving in the open, that visibility would become something much more dangerous. For them, because the restaurant they were building, it wasn't just shaky. It was illegal in at least 3 ways. And they'd used my name more than once to justify it. I knew that because Dana had just sent me the documents. And once your name gets dragged back into a lie, you don't stay quiet. You decide how the truth comes out and who's standing when it does. The documents Dana sent didn't look dramatic. That was the dangerous part. They were ordinary filings. Permit applications, vendor proposals, lease drafts, the kind of paperwork most people never read past the signature line. But when you laid them side by side, a pattern emerged. Lauren Pierce had listed herself as creative director on the new restaurant group. Victor Sloan appeared as an operations consultant. Ethan Caldwell wasn't listed at all. Instead, his name appeared in the financing trail. A personal guarantee tucked into a short-term private loan. An equity bridge that assumed rapid opening and aggressive early revenue. And in two separate vendor proposals, a reference to previously successful concepts developed by Marissa Caldwell. My name. Not as owner, not as consultant. As precedent. I sat in Dana Whitmore's office while she walked me through it, her voice calm, precise. They're leveraging your past credibility without permission, she said. It's not illegal yet, but it's close. Close to what? I asked. To misrepresentation, she replied, and potentially fraud if they solicit investment under false assumptions. Walter Hensley listened quietly from the corner, arms folded. They're betting on speed, he said. Open fast, sell confidence, outrun scrutiny. That was Victor's play with me, I said. Yes, Walter replied. And you survived it. Barely. Dana closed her laptop. We have options. I don't want to shut them down directly, I said. Not yet. Dana raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because if they fail quietly, they'll blame timing, I said. If they fail publicly, they'll blame me. I want something else. Walter tilted his head slightly. You want them exposed? Yes, I said. By their own process. That was the moment Dana smiled. Then we let them talk, she said. And we listened. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. Nina Alvarez, the food columnist, emailed me 2 days later. Heard a new group is opening in Tampa using former Harbor and Vine leadership energy. Care to comment? I forwarded the email to Dana without responding. Dana replied with one line. Perfect. Instead of answering Mina, we sent a letter. Polite, neutral, from Dana's firm. It clarified that I had no affiliation with any Tampa restaurant group, had not authorized use of my name, and had no involvement with Victor Sloan or Lauren Pierce. No accusations, just facts, Nina replied within the hour. Thank you, that helps. Lauren posted again that evening. A photo of construction progress. A caption about building something honest from the ground up. I watched it without blinking. At Saltline, things stayed steady. That was important. No visible reaction, no social media responses. No whispers. Control, I was learning, often looked like stillness. 2 weeks later, Walter invited me to lunch at a place I'd never been to, despite living nearby. A private dining club overlooking the marina. Quiet, discreet. There was another man at the table when I arrived. Late 50s, sharp eyes, soft-spoken. Marissa, Walter said, standing. This is Richard Hale. Richard Hale extended his hand. I've heard your name more times than you know. From where? I asked. From people who wish they'd listened to you sooner, he replied. Richard Hale was an angel investor, not a flashy one, the kind who showed up after due diligence, not before. They're pitching me, he said casually, taking a sip of water. My pulse didn't change. Lauren and Victor? And Ethan, Richard added, though he doesn't speak much. Did they mention me? I asked. Richard smiled faintly. Indirectly, I waited. They framed you as talented but emotionally overwhelmed, he said. Said the failure wasn't structural, just personal. That was expected. What did you say? I asked. That I prefer numbers, Richard replied. And timelines. Walter watched me closely. Richard asked to meet you. Why? I asked. Because, Richard said, I wanted to see if the person they described existed. And? I asked. He met my eyes. She doesn't. Lunch ended without promises. But 3 days later, Richard declined their pitch. He didn't tell them why. That night, Ethan texted me again. Did you talk to Richard Hale? I didn't reply. A second message followed. Lauren is freaking out. I put the phone down. The next escalation came from Victor Sloan himself. He emailed me directly. Marissa, heard you back in the game. Congrats. Thought maybe we could clear the air. Coffee? I forwarded the email to Dana. Her reply was immediate. Do not engage. Instead, she sent Victor a formal notice. reminding him that any reference to my work, name, or former business without written consent would be documented. Victor replied to Dana within minutes. Hostile much? Dana didn't respond. Neither did I. Saltline's second location was approved the following week. Different city, different investors, clean lease, conservative growth. Walter reviewed the numbers and nodded once. Now you're building a pattern. Patterns were dangerous for people like Victor. Lauren called me that Sunday, from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounded strained. Marissa, I don't understand why you're doing this. We're not trying to hurt you. We're just trying to survive. I deleted it. Because survival doesn't look like rewriting someone else's story to make yourself feel cleaner. 2 days later, Nina Alvarez published her piece. She didn't name names. She didn't accuse. She wrote about how some restaurant groups were marketing resilience while obscuring accountability. About how failed concepts were being recycled as inspiration without acknowledging responsibility. She quoted an unnamed source. Failure isn't a brand asset. It's a lesson. Pretending otherwise is how people get hurt. The comments exploded. Victor Sloan deactivated his LinkedIn that afternoon. Lauren posted nothing for 3 days. Ethan showed up at Saltline again, this time during lunch service. I didn't go to him. He waited. When the rush slowed, I stepped out from the kitchen. You're ruining everything, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm refusing to lie. They won't fund us now, he snapped. Then your plan wasn't strong, I said. You could have warned us, he said. I did, I replied. By leaving. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. I used to know you, he said. You used to benefit from me, I corrected. He left without another word. That night, Dana called. They're scrambling, she said. And Victor just made a mistake. What kind? I asked. He tried to pressure a vendor into backdating invoices, she replied. The vendor documented it. I closed my eyes. Is it enough? I asked. It's not enough to arrest, Dana said. But it's enough to collapse trust. Walter joined the call. They're running out of time, he said. And when time runs out, people like Victor don't retreat. They lash out, I said. Yes, Walter replied. Which means the next move won't be subtle. I hung up and stood alone in the darkened restaurant. The chairs were stacked, the floors clean, the books balanced. Everything was in order, except for the storm building across the bay. Because when people realize they can't win quietly, they stop caring who hears the noise. And whatever Victor Sloan was about to do next, it wouldn't just involve me. It would involve names he shouldn't have used. And a public reckoning he could no longer outrun. Victor Sloan didn't call when he decided to strike. He sent paperwork. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, buried in my inbox between linen invoices and a health inspection reminder. Subject line, Notice of Intent. I read it once. Then again. Victor was alleging breach of implied partnership, claiming I had verbally committed to advising the Tampa project and then interfered with investor relations. He cited lost opportunity, damages, reputation harm. It was thin, sloppy, desperate. Dana Whitmore called me before I could even forward it. He filed in Hillsborough County, she said. Small civil action. He's fishing. For what? I asked. A reaction, she replied. Or a settlement he can spin as validation. Walter Hensley joined the call a moment later. This is classic Victor, he said. Create noise. Hope someone pays to make it stop. I won't, I said. I know, Walter replied. But we need to respond correctly. Dana was already drafting. A motion to dismiss. A counter notice documenting misrepresentation. And, quietly, a request for discovery. That's what he's afraid of, she said. Discovery forces truth. The filing gave us something else, too. A time Victor had submitted his notice the same day a key vendor withdrew from the Tampa project. Coincidence. Only if you believed in them. Lauren Pierce called that afternoon. I answered this time. Please, she said immediately. No greeting, no pretense. This is spiraling. You're the one who wanted speed, I replied. Victor said you were undermining us, she snapped. Victor lies, I said calmly. You know that. She went quiet. We're exposed, she said finally. Ethan's name is on everything. If this collapses, it's not just money. I leaned back in my chair. Then you should have built something honest. That's easy for you to say, she shot back. You have Walter. I have boundaries, I corrected. You had choices. She hung up. That evening, Ethan sent me a single text. I didn't know he'd do this. I stared at the screen. Neither did I. 2 days later, Victor escalated again. This time, he contacted the local licensing board, alleging irregularities in my original restaurant closure, questioning payroll practices, vendor payments, compliance. It was malicious, transparent, and easily disproven. Dana laughed when she saw it. He's panicking, she said. This is retaliation. Does it hurt me? I asked. No, she replied. But it hurts him. The board forwarded the complaint back to my accountant, who confirmed everything within 24 hours. Clean records, proper closure, no findings. But the paper trail now showed a pattern. Victor Sloan, repeated false claims, pressure tactics, documentation abuse. And because he'd filed a civil notice, discovery was now mutual. Dana requested emails, contracts, investor decks. Victor delayed, then resisted. Then his attorney withdrew. That was the moment Walter leaned forward and said, "Now." We didn't go to the press. We went to the investors. Richard Hale wasn't the only one Victor and Lauren had pitched. Dana identified 3 others, all quiet, all cautious, all suddenly curious. Dana sent each of them a neutral disclosure packet. It didn't accuse. It clarified my non-involvement, Victor's history, the misuse of my name, the pending civil action. 2 declined funding immediately. The 3rd asked questions Victor couldn't answer. The Tampa project froze. Lauren posted a long message that night about betrayal, resilience, and starting over. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments were not kind. Saltline's 2nd location opened the following week. We didn't announce it loudly, but people noticed. A restaurant that worked didn't need defending. On opening night, Walter stood beside me in the kitchen, watching service flow. "You're not reacting anymore," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm finishing." Victor made one last attempt. He emailed me directly. "This doesn't have to get uglier." I forwarded it to Dana. She replied with a single line. "He's asking for mercy." I didn't respond. Instead, Dana filed a supplemental motion. Attached were vendor affidavits, investor statements, screenshots of emails where Victor referenced my work without consent. She didn't ask for damages. She asked for sanctions. The court scheduled a hearing. Lauren showed up. Victor didn't. Ethan sat in the back, pale, hands clenched. Victor's absence didn't help him. The judge reviewed the filings, asked a few pointed questions, and issued a warning. Not a ruling, a warning. Further abuse of process would carry penalties. Victor finally appeared in court the following week. He looked smaller than I remembered, less polished. Still smiling, but the edges were frayed. When asked why he'd referenced my work, he hesitated. "I thought it would help," he said. "Help whom?" the judge asked. He didn't answer. Outside the courthouse, Ethan approached me. "This is ruining us," he said quietly. "You ruined yourself," I replied. "I trusted the wrong people," he said. "Yes," I said. "You did." He looked like he wanted to say more, then didn't. Lauren didn't approach me. She left with Victor. 2 weeks later, the Tampa project dissolved. No announcement, no apology. Just a quiet LLC termination filing. Victor Sloan moved on to another state. Lauren deleted her business page. Ethan sold the condo. Saltline signed a lease for a 3rd location. That night, Walter and I sat at the bar after close. "You could have crushed them harder," he said. "I know," I replied. "Why didn't you?" he asked. "Because I didn't want to become them," I said. "I wanted to outlast them." He nodded. "That's rarer." As I locked up and walked into the cool night air, my phone buzzed with a notification. A new message from Nina Alvarez. "Would you be willing to talk now?" I smiled faintly. Because the story wasn't about collapse anymore. It was about contrast. And the next chapter wouldn't be written in court filings or accusations. It would be written in daylight, where everyone could see who had built something real, and who had only ever borrowed credibility they didn't earn. I met Nina Alvarez on a Tuesday morning, before the lunch rush, before the noise could soften anything. She chose Saltline's first location, not the new one. Said she wanted to see where it started. I respected that. She arrived without a photographer, no notebook, just a phone face down on the table, and a look that said she already knew more than she was letting on. "I'm not here to rehabilitate anyone," she said as we sat. "I'm here to understand contrast." "That's fair," I replied. She ordered coffee, black, watched the room while the staff moved with practiced ease. "You don't hover," she said. "Most owners do." "I hire well," I replied. "Then I stay out of the way." She nodded. "That's a learned behavior." I didn't correct her. We talked about food first, about why simple menus last longer, about why consistency matters more than novelty, about how restaurants don't fail because of one bad night, but because of repeated small decisions no one wants to argue about. Then she asked the question she'd been holding. "Why didn't you defend yourself publicly?" I didn't answer immediately. "Because the version of me they were selling needed noise to survive," I said finally. I didn't. She tapped the table once. "That's what I suspected." I told her the story, but not the way people expect. No villains, no speeches, just sequence. What I built, what I trusted, what collapsed, what I refused to repeat. I didn't mention Ethan's name until she asked. "And your husband?" she said. "Ex," I corrected. "He chose convenience." "And your former friend?" she asked. "She chose proximity to power," I replied. Nina didn't flinch. "And you?" "I chose clarity," I said. When she left, she didn't promise anything, just shook my hand and said, "Thank you for not trying to sell me pain." The article ran 10 days later. It wasn't a feature. It was a profile. No headlines about betrayal. No names dragged through mud. Just a quiet piece about rebuilding with intention. About why some restaurateurs disappear and others re-emerge differently. She never mentioned Victor Sloan. She didn't need to. The comment section did the rest. People remembered. They connected dots. They shared stories. The Tampa project came up again, this time as a cautionary footnote. Salt line reservations doubled within a week. Lauren Pierce emailed me that Friday. No subject line, just text. "I never meant for this to hurt you." I stared at it for a long time, then replied with one sentence. "Intent doesn't undo impact." She didn't respond. Ethan didn't either. I heard about him through someone else. He'd taken a contract job in Orlando. Short-term, unstable. The kind of work you don't plan a future around. I felt nothing. Walter called me that afternoon. "You're being asked to speak," he said. "Where?" I asked. "A regional hospitality panel," he replied. "Risk management, ethical growth. They want your perspective." I laughed once. "I didn't go to business school." "You went through business," Walter said. "That counts." I agreed on one condition: no mention of my past restaurant by name. The panel was held in Sarasota. Small, intimate, industry people who knew how quickly things could turn. I spoke last. I didn't talk about revenge, or betrayal, or resilience. I talked about structure, about why clarity beats charisma, about why contracts should protect reality, not hope, about why silence isn't weakness if it's intentional. Afterward, a woman approached me, early 40s, well-dressed, sharp eyes. "I'm opening my third place," she said, "and I'm terrified." "Good," I replied. "That means you'll check your assumptions." She smiled. "Will you consult?" I hesitated, then nodded. "On one condition." "Which is?" "You listen when something feels off," I said. "Even if it's inconvenient." She agreed immediately. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the old folder I'd kept closed for months. Harbor and Vine. I didn't feel bitterness or grief, just distance. I deleted it. The past no longer needed documentation. Walter invited me to dinner the following week. At his house. Not the office, not the club. It felt different. "You've outgrown my protection," he said over dessert. Not accusing, observing. "I was never under it," I replied. "Just adjacent." He smiled. "That's why this worked." He poured us each a small glass of whiskey. "To restraint," he said. "To clarity," I replied. As I drove home, my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number," I answered. "This is Victor Sloan," a voice said. I closed my eyes. "I think we should talk," he continued. "Privately." "No," I said. "You don't know what I'm prepared to offer," he said. "I know what you're trying to buy," I replied. "And I'm not for sale." He laughed softly. "You think you won." "I think you're irrelevant," I said. I hung up. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Because the people who once defined the edge of my life were finally nowhere near it. And the next chapter wouldn't be about responding to threats or dismantling lies. It would be about expansion. Real expansion. The kind that forces ghosts to stay behind. And I was ready for it. Expansion doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives disguised as logistics, permits, staffing spreadsheets, early mornings that don't feel dramatic until you realize you're no longer reacting to anything. You're deciding. The third Salt Line location broke ground in Sarasota on a stretch of road that had chewed up 3 restaurants in 5 years. Bad parking, inconsistent foot traffic, landlords who preferred promises to math. I took it anyway. Not because I wanted to prove something, because the numbers worked when you stopped pretending weekends would save you. Walter didn't try to talk me out of it. He asked one question instead. What happens if this one underperforms? We close it cleanly, I replied. No ego, no denial. He nodded. Then proceed. That answer was new for me. A year earlier, closure felt like failure. Now, it felt like governance. I hired a general manager named Tessa Nguyen, 34, previously operations lead at a regional fast casual chain. She asked hard questions in the interview, challenged assumptions, pushed back on staffing ratios. I hired her on the spot. You don't flatter, I told her. I don't survive if I do, she replied. That was alignment. While construction moved forward, something else surfaced. The licensing board followed up on Victor Sloan's complaint with a routine inquiry. Not because they suspected me, because patterns matter to regulators too. Dana handled it. Clean responses, clear timelines, documentation. 3 days later, the board contacted Victor. He didn't respond. A week after that, they contacted Lauren Pierce. Her name had appeared as a signatory on 2 vendor documents that conflicted with filings she'd submitted elsewhere. Small discrepancies. Enough to trigger review. She called me that night. This time, she didn't pretend. They're asking questions, she said, voice shaking. About Victor. About the Tampa thing. About me. I can't help you, I said. You could, she insisted. You could explain that I wasn't the decision maker. You were comfortable taking credit, I replied. You'll have to be comfortable with accountability. She cried then. Not theatrically. Quietly. I thought if I stayed close to power, I'd be safe, she said. I felt a flicker of something. Not sympathy. Recognition. That only works if power is stable, I said. Borrowed power never is. She hung up without saying goodbye. Ethan didn't call. I found out what happened to him through Dana. Victor Sloan had quietly settled 2 unrelated claims in another state. Not an admission, just an exit. As part of that settlement, he transferred partial liability to a former associate. Ethan. He signed things he didn't read, Dana said. He guaranteed obligations he didn't understand. Is he exposed? I asked. Yes, she replied. But not because of you. I let that sit. The Sarasota location opened 6 weeks later. It wasn't perfect. The first weekend was rough. A freezer malfunction, a server no-show, a delivery that arrived late. I didn't panic. I watched. Tessa adjusted. The team adapted. By Sunday night, service smoothed. That's how you know if a system works. Not when everything goes right, when something goes wrong and no one looks for someone to blame. Nina Alvarez returned, unannounced, 2 weeks after opening. She sat at the bar, ordered quietly, watched. When I checked on her, she smiled. You didn't flinch. At what? I asked. At pressure, she said. Most owners perform confidence. You practice it. She wrote another piece, smaller, deeper, about women in hospitality who built infrastructure instead of brands. About how restraint wasn't boring. It was rare. I didn't read the comments. I didn't need to. One afternoon, as I reviewed a lease amendment, Walter called. I'm stepping back, he said. I paused. From what? From Salt Line, he replied. Gradually. I didn't react. You've replaced my role, he continued. That was the point. When? I asked. 6 months, he said. You'll have first right to buy out my equity. That's a lot, I said. You can afford it, he replied. If you want to. I thought about it all night. About ownership. About responsibility. about what it meant to stand alone again. The next morning, I called him back. "I'll do it," I said. He smiled through the phone. Good. That same day, I received an email from the licensing board, not about me, about Lauren Pierce. They were opening a formal review into misrepresentation tied to the Tampa filings. No charges yet, just scrutiny. Scrutiny changes people. Lauren didn't reach out again. Ethan did. Once. I was leaving the Sarasota location when he approached me in the parking lot. He looked thinner, older, the confidence gone. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said. "It didn't end," I replied. "It just revealed itself." He swallowed. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said honestly. "I don't think about you." That hurt him more than anger would have. He nodded once. "I'm sorry." "I know," I replied. And I meant it. Because apologies matter only when they arrive without expectation. As I drove away, I realized something that surprised me. The revenge everyone imagines never happened. I didn't ruin anyone. I didn't expose secrets dramatically. I didn't raise my voice. I built something that made their shortcuts obvious. And in doing so, I stopped being a reference point for their excuses. The final shift came quietly. Walter transferred his first tranche of equity. Tessa proposed a fourth location timeline. A consulting offer turned into a long-term advisory contract. I stood in the original Saltline kitchen one night after close, alone, listening to the hum of the refrigerators. This place wasn't a comeback. It was a correction. And as I turned off the lights, I knew the last chapter wouldn't be about what I gained. It would be about what I refused to give back. Access. Silence. And the version of myself that once thought loyalty meant staying. That version was gone, and nothing was coming for it. Not ever again. The board hearing wasn't dramatic. That's what surprised everyone who expected spectacle. Lauren Pierce sat at a narrow table in a municipal office building in Tampa, across from three people who didn't care about her intentions, her fear, or her explanations. They cared about documents, dates, signatures, contradictions. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Dana Whitmore attended as an observer, nothing more. She sent me a summary afterward. 2 pages, precise, clinical. Lauren admitted she had signed vendor agreements without verifying funding sources. She admitted Victor Sloan drafted language she didn't fully understand. She admitted she used prior projects as reference points without permission. What did she think would happen? I asked when Dana called. She thought charm would soften consequences, Dana replied. It didn't. The board issued a finding of professional misconduct. No criminal charges, no headlines. But her license to act as a managing partner was suspended for 18 months. 18 months is a long time in hospitality. By the end of that call, the Tampa project was no longer just dead. It was radioactive. The fallout reached Ethan next. His name appeared again, this time in a creditor filing tied to Victor's settlement. A clause he hadn't noticed transferred secondary liability to him in the event of dissolution. He called me that night. "I'm drowning," he said. "I know," I replied. "You could help," he said. Not demanding, just tired. I thought carefully before answering. "No," I said, "but I won't interfere if you help yourself." "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means sell cleanly," I said. "Disclose everything. Stop trying to shortcut consequences." He exhaled slowly. "Lauren's blaming me. She always needed someone to carry weight," I replied. "That hasn't changed." He didn't argue. 2 weeks later, he filed for personal restructuring. Not bankruptcy, reorganization. Painful, public, necessary. That was the last time he contacted me. At Saltline, things moved forward. The fourth location became real, not speculative. Tessa led the rollout with quiet authority. I reviewed budgets without emotion, approved delays when they made sense, rejected ideas that relied on hype instead of data. Walter transferred another portion of equity. The day the final tranche paperwork arrived, I sat alone in my office after closing and signed my name once. No celebration. Ownership didn't feel like triumph. It felt like responsibility settling into place. Nina Alvarez asked to meet again. This time, I suggested walking. We moved along the marina path in the early evening. The air warm, the water calm. "They want a follow-up," she said. "About what?" I asked. "About aftermath," she replied. "People love collapse. They rarely stay for what comes after. And what comes after? I asked. She looked at me. Governance. I smiled faintly. That's not very clickable. Neither is truth, she said. But it lasts longer. I agreed to speak. On one condition. No villains. No redemption arcs. Just outcomes. The piece ran a week later. It talked about how misalignment compounds, how borrowed credibility expires, how rebuilding without noise can be more disruptive than public confrontation. Lauren's name wasn't mentioned. Victor's wasn't either. Readers filled in the blanks themselves. The final message came unexpectedly. A handwritten note arrived at Salt Line, forwarded from the first location. It was from Lauren. Short. Careful. I didn't understand power. I thought proximity was the same thing. I was wrong. No apology, no request, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond. Some messages aren't meant to continue. That night, after service, Tessa joined me at the bar. You ever miss the old chaos? She asked. No, I replied immediately. She smiled. Good, because this place doesn't need it. I locked up and walked home alone. For the first time since Harbor and Vine closed, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about scale, about sustainability, about how many people now relied on decisions I made, quietly, without fanfare. Revenge had never been the point. Correction was. And correction, when done properly, leaves very little to argue with. As I turned the key in my door, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Board meeting, 8 a.m. I set my bag down, poured a glass of water, and sat in the stillness. The people who had once defined the edge of my life were gone, not erased. Just irrelevant. And the final chapter wouldn't be about them at all. It would be about what I chose to protect, now that I finally could. Not my pride, not my past, but the systems I'd built and the boundaries that made them possible. The board meeting started on time. That alone told me how much things had changed. A year earlier, any meeting tied to my name had drifted. Late arrivals, side conversations, decisions postponed because someone with louder confidence needed reassurance. Now, everyone was seated, documents open, phones face down. I stood at the head of the table, not because I needed to, but because no one questioned it. Tess and Wynn sat to my right, already marking notes. The regional managers joined remotely, cameras on, posture attentive. The numbers on the screen were clean, conservative, honest, no theatrics. We reviewed labor costs first, then supply chain adjustments, then expansion pacing. When a manager suggested accelerating the 5th location to capture seasonal traffic, I didn't dismiss it immediately. Show me the downside, I said. He hesitated, then did. That pause mattered. Thank you, I said. We'll revisit next quarter. No disappointment, no defensiveness. Just acceptance. That was leadership I could live with. After the meeting, Walter Hensley called. Congratulations, he said. For what? I asked. You didn't rush, he replied. That's when I knew stepping back was the right call. You built this too, I said. I built scaffolding, he corrected. You built structure. We talked briefly about the equity transfer schedule, about tax timing, about how to communicate the change internally. Then he said something I hadn't expected. People are asking about you, he said. Who? I asked. Private equity, he replied. Not to buy you, to learn from you. I smiled faintly. I'm not interested. I know, he said. That's why they are. I ended the call and sat alone for a moment. Being wanted wasn't new. Being respected was. Later that afternoon, Dana Whitmore emailed me a final update. Lauren Pierce had accepted the board's findings without appeal. She entered a compliance program voluntarily. No public statement, no deflection. Ethan Caldwell's restructuring plan was approved. Assets liquidated, obligations consolidated. He'd found stable employment outside hospitality. Victor Sloan hadn't resurfaced. It felt finished. Not satisfying. Finished. That evening, I returned to the original Salt Line location. Not to manage, to observe. The staff moved easily. Conversations were relaxed. Mistakes corrected without panic. A young line cook dropped a tray, paused, cleaned it up, kept moving. That's what safety looks like in a system. Not perfection, recovery. As I watched, a woman approached me near the bar. I don't want to interrupt, she said, hesitant. "But are you Marissa?" "Yes," I replied. "My sister worked at Harbor and Vine," she said. "She said you always stayed late to close with them." I nodded. "That sounds like me." "She told me that when it closed, you cried in the walk-in," the woman continued. "But you still paid everyone their final checks on time." I felt my throat tighten slightly. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She smiled. "I just wanted you to know people noticed." After she left, I stepped outside. The air was warm, the street quiet. I thought about the version of myself who signed that delivery app contract, unseen in her own kitchen, while her marriage dissolved behind her. I thought about how small decisions accumulate. Not the loud ones, the quiet ones. The choice not to beg, the choice not to explain, the choice not to rescue people who chose to abandon integrity. Revenge, I realized, isn't always about watching someone fall. Sometimes it's about watching them no longer matter to your trajectory. I drove home slowly. When I arrived, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. From the SBA, it confirmed the final settlement of my original loan deficiency. Paid in full. Closed. I held the paper for a long time. That debt had followed me through humiliation, reinvention, and silence. And now it was gone. I didn't celebrate. I filed it, because that chapter had already been written out of me. Before bed, I opened my calendar and blocked off a week. No meetings, no travel, no decisions. Rest had become a strategy. As I turned off the lights, I realized something that felt almost unfamiliar. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on things staying quiet. The earned kind. The kind that comes after you've stopped proving yourself to people who never planned to understand you. The next chapter wouldn't introduce a new enemy. It would introduce a new question. What do you build when nothing is chasing you anymore? And how do you protect it without becoming rigid? I fell asleep before answering, because some answers don't come from thinking. They come from staying still long enough to hear what's already true. The week I blocked off my calendar felt wrong at first. I woke up early out of habit, reached for my phone, then stopped. No emails, no numbers waiting to be checked, no decisions demanding proof. The silence pressed in, unfamiliar and slightly uncomfortable. That was how I knew it was necessary. I drove north without a plan, crossed the bridge out of St. Petersburg, and kept going until the buildings thinned and the water widened. I rented a small place near Cedar Key, nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, a porch, a view of boats that came and went without explanation. On the second morning, I cooked for myself for the first time in months, not testing recipes, not scaling portions, just eggs, toast, coffee. I ate standing at the counter, then sat down halfway through, surprised by the luxury of not rushing. This was what I had lost before I lost the restaurant. Choice. On the third day, my mother called. We hadn't spoken much since Harbor and Vine closed. She hadn't disapproved of me. She'd simply stepped back, the way people do when they don't know how to help and don't want to be asked. "I heard you're doing well," she said carefully. "I am," I replied. "I always knew you would," she said, then paused. "I just didn't know when." That was as close as she'd come to acknowledging how alone I'd been. We talked about nothing important. The weather, a neighbor's dog, a cousin's engagement I wouldn't attend. When we hung up, I felt lighter. Not because something had been fixed, but because something had been allowed to exist without tension. That night, I dreamed of Harbor and Vine. Not the closing, not the loss. Just a busy service, steam rising, voices overlapping. In the dream, nothing went wrong. Nothing needed saving. I woke up calm. When I returned to the city, Tessa met me at the third location with an update. "Staffing is stable," she said. "Turnover's lower than projected. And we had 2 managers ask about long-term growth paths." "Good," I replied. "That means they're thinking past survival." She hesitated. "There's something else." I waited. "People keep asking about you," she said. "Your story. They frame it like a comeback." "I don't love that word," I said. "I know," she replied, "but it's circulating." That was the risk of visibility. Narratives form, whether you participate or not. "I don't want Saltline built on my past," I said. "I want it built on its present." Tessa nodded. "Then we should formalize culture." We spent the afternoon drafting something I'd avoided for years. Principles, not slogans. Boundaries. How decisions are made. How disagreement is handled. What happens when someone fails without malice? What happens when someone crosses a line? We wrote it plainly. No inspiration quotes, no branding language. When we finished, Tessa looked at me. "You know this will outlive us," she said. "Yes," I replied. "That's the point." That evening, Dana Whitmore called one last time about the past. "The file is closed," she said. "All of it." "Lauren?" I asked. "She completed her intake," Dana replied. "She'll be under review, but it's procedural now." "Ethan?" I asked. "He's compliant," Dana said, keeping his head down. "And Victor?" I asked. A pause. Then, "He's not your problem anymore." I thanked her and hung up. For the first time, there was nothing unresolved waiting to surface. No loose ends disguised as potential threats. Just space. A few days later, Nina Alvarez emailed me. "I'm writing one last piece. Not about you, about systems that reward restraint. Would you like to contribute a paragraph?" I thought about it longer than I expected. Then I wrote back. One paragraph. No attribution. The paragraph didn't mention betrayal, or failure, or success. It talked about how most harm isn't done by cruelty, but by people protecting their comfort at the expense of clarity. It ended with one line. "Boundaries are not walls, they are instructions." Nina, the response was quiet, thoughtful, the kind that doesn't trend but lingers. On a Friday night, after closing, I stayed late again, not because something needed fixing, because I wanted to be there. I walked through the dining room, ran my hand along the backs of chairs, listened to the echo of a space that held work without chaos. This was the opposite of revenge. Revenge feeds on proximity. This fed on distance. Distance from old roles, old obligations, old definitions of loyalty. The next morning, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was Lauren. "I don't expect a response. I just want you to know I see now what I refused to see before." I read it once, then deleted it, not out of anger, out of completion. Some realizations arrive too late to change outcomes, but just in time to prevent repetition. That was her work now, not mine. As the sun rose higher, I poured coffee and sat by the window, watching the street wake up. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. The past had finished speaking, and the only choosing. One chapter remained, not about them, about me, and what I would do with a life no longer shaped by recovery, but by intention. The last thing to settle wasn't the business, it was me. I realized that on a quiet Sunday morning, sitting alone in the first Saltline location before opening, the chairs were still upside down on tables. The smell of clean floors lingered. Outside, the street was empty in a way that only happens when the city hasn't decided what kind of day it's going to be yet. For years, my life had been shaped by reaction. Build, defend, recover, prove, stabilize. Even when I thought I was choosing freely, I was responding to something that had already hurt me. A closure, a betrayal, a loss I refused to repeat. Now there was nothing left to push against, and that was the most unfamiliar feeling of all. I didn't need Saltline to grow faster. It was already doing what it was meant to do. I didn't need my story corrected. Anyone paying attention could see the contrast. I didn't need apologies. The absence of interference had become its own kind of peace. So I made a decision that surprised even me. I stepped back, not away, back. I promoted Tessa Nguyen to Chief Operating Officer across all locations, gave her real authority, not symbolic responsibility. Clear limits, clear trust. She didn't thank me emotionally. She nodded, asked practical questions, and got to work. That was exactly why she was right for it. I kept my role focused. Strategy, oversight, long-term planning. No daily firefighting. No ego attachment to being indispensable. I learned to let the system breathe without me hovering over it. That was harder than rebuilding ever was. On a Tuesday afternoon, I signed the final documents to complete the buyout of Walter Hensley's remaining equity. We met once more, not in his office, not at his house, but at a quiet cafe halfway between our worlds. "You're not replacing me," he said as he slid the papers across the table. "You're ending the need for me." "That was always the goal," I replied. He smiled. "Most people say that. Few mean it." When I left, I didn't feel heavier. I felt lighter. Later that week, I received an invitation to speak at a national hospitality conference. Main stage. My name in large letters. a story angle they clearly wanted to lean into. I declined. Instead, I suggested Tessa. The organizer hesitated, then agreed. When Tessa found out, she stared at me for a long moment. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "This doesn't need to orbit me." She nodded slowly. "Then I won't make it about inspiration." "Good," I replied. "Make it about systems." That night, I went home early. I cooked dinner for myself. Simple. Nothing I'd ever serve in a restaurant. Ate slowly. Cleaned up immediately after. I thought about Ethan once, briefly. About how small his world had become after he mistook proximity for partnership. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't wish him well, either. He was no longer part of my mental landscape. Lauren crossed my mind too. Not as a friend, as a lesson. People who stay close to power without building their own eventually get crushed by it. That truth no longer hurt. It just existed. A month later, Saltline opened its 4th location quietly. No press, no fanfare. Just another place that worked. I stood in the doorway during soft opening, watching guests settle in, watching staff move with confidence, watching a business operate without needing my presence to hold it together. That was the win. Not wealth, not scale. Autonomy. I drove home under a sky just beginning to darken. Windows down, radio off. For the first time in years, there was no narrative forming in my head. No speech, no defense, no future explanation. Just a steady sense of direction. If you've stayed with me through this story, you probably recognize parts of it in your own life. Not the restaurants, not the money, but the moment when you realized loyalty had quietly become self-erasure. When staying felt heavier than leaving. When rebuilding required silence instead of spectacle. If this story resonated, like it. It helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. If you've lived through something similar, share it in the comments. Not to relive it, but to mark that you survived it. And if you want more stories about family drama, betrayal, revenge that doesn't rot the soul, and the kind of justice that arrives without noise, subscribe. Some endings don't close doors. They teach you which ones were never meant to be reopened. And once you learn that, you don't look back. You build forward.